What's up, guys? This is Chris from DraftDashboard.com.
Here are my DFS picks for NFL Week 15. Final look.
These picks apply for DraftKings and FanDuel. Before I get started, please drop a like on this video and hit that red subscribe button
And hit that bell icon
so you don't miss our new videos.
In this video, I'm going to go over my top picks for this week's NFL slate. And if you stick around to the very end of this video, we'll use the Draft Dashboard tools to make a DFS lineup using the picks we just made. Okay guys, NFL Week 15. Let's take a look at the quarterbacks. So, not a lot of quarterbacks I love this week. The top two QBs I'm going to go with, the first one is Justin Herbert from the LA Chargers playing the Tennessee Titans, who have the fifth worst defense overall. They give up the second most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. Justin Herbert has averaged 19.4 fantasy points per game on the season. He gets an average of 3.5 rush attempts per game. Going to be about 10% owned. Projected at 20.9 fantasy points here in Week 15. He's $7,200 DraftKings salary, $1,100 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 46.5 points scored in this game, with the Chargers favored by 3. So Justin Herbert has scored 23, 21, and 29 fantasy points in the last 3 games. He got 4, 5, and 4 rush attempts in those games. He's been playing really well the last 3 weeks, got his wide receivers healthy. Both Keenan Allen and Mike Williams are rolling. Gerald Everett still good to go at tight end, so he's got all of his weapons available in a great matchup, and he's still in the hunt for the playoffs. So I like Justin Herbert here versus the Tennessee Titans. So I just want to correct that. It looks like the Chargers are more on the bubble as opposed to in the hunt. But on the bubble means they got a chance, so they got to win this game. So that's why I like the Chargers and Justin Herbert. It's a must-win game here this week. The other quarterback that I like is Dak Prescott from the Dallas Cowboys playing the Jacksonville Jaguars, who have the 9th worst defense overall. They give up the 7th most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. Dak Prescott has averaged 17 fantasy points per game on the season. He gets an average of 3.1 rush attempts per game. He's going to be about 9% owned, projected at 19.4 fantasy points here in Week 15. And he's only $6,200 DraftKings salary, $1,300 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 47.5 points scored in this game, with the Cowboys favored by 4. So Dak Prescott has scored 16, 18, and 17 fantasy points in the last 3 games. He got 6, 0, and 2 rush attempts in those games. I think he can go for 20 plus fantasy points this week. So I like Dak Prescott here versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. Okay, let's take a look at the running back position. I like Alvin Kamara from the New Orleans Saints playing the Atlanta Falcons, who have the 3rd worst defense overall. They give up the 9th most fantasy points to opposing running backs. Alvin Kamara has averaged 15.1 fantasy points per game on the season. He's getting an average of 13 rush attempts per game, 6.2 pass targets per game. So he's getting close to 20 touches per game on average, on the field for 70% of the snaps. Going to be about 21% owned, projected at 16.7 fantasy points here in Week 15. He's $6,800 DraftKings salary, $800 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 43.5 points scored in this game, with the Saints favored by 4. So Alvin Kamara has scored 6, 9, and 13 fantasy points in the last 3 games. off of 12, 7, and 12 rush attempts on top of 3, 7, and 5 pass targets. So underperforming his season average all 3 games in his last 3 games. I think he's due for a 20-plus fantasy point performance. He's got a good matchup here. So I like Alvin Kamara here versus the Atlanta Falcons. Okay, guys, it's time to announce the winner of our $25 weekly PayPal giveaway. And the winner is Scooby J. Scooby J, congratulations. You are the winner of this week's $25 PayPal giveaway. Please reply to our comment to collect your prize.
Before I continue with the picks, I'm excited today because we added a new contest for everyone watching.
If you want to enter the drawing for $25 PayPal,
all you need to do is like this video, hit that subscribe button, and make a quick comment below to be entered into the drawing. We'll reply to a random comment and let you know that you won.
And we'll send you $25 PayPal.
So it's that easy, and we pick a new winner every Saturday and announce them in our video. So get your comment in now so I can add another entry for you.
Now another stud that I like is Derrick Henry. He's 8,000 DraftKings salary, but he's got a fantastic matchup here versus the Chargers, and he's going to be about 23% owned. He's 8,000 DraftKings salary, 900 more on FanDuel. He scored 26 fantasy points last week off of 17 rush attempts and 5 pass targets. So he's a stud to keep your eye on here in week 15. But the other couple of players that are mid-range salary that I like, even though he doesn't have a good matchup here, I like Travis Etienne from the Jacksonville Jaguars playing the Dallas Cowboys, who have a good defense overall. They've been good versus opposing running backs. Travis Etienne has averaged 12.4 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 12.5 rush attempts per game, 2.6 pass targets per game. Now, those averages have come up since he took over as the lead running back. He was injured for a few games and he just got back to full strength last game. He had 17 rush attempts last game. Now, he only scored 3 fantasy points, so not a good week, but I do think he's going to put up 20 plus touches now that he's got a healthy week under his belt. Although it's not a good matchup, he's going to be about 12% owned, projected at 13.3 fantasy points here in week 15. He's only 6,000 DraftKings salary, 1,000 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 47.5 points scored in this game, with the Jaguars trailing by 4. So I do think he's going to get 20 plus touches here this week. I think he's a talented running back and could easily put up 15 plus fantasy points. So I like Travis Etienne here versus the Dallas Cowboys. Another running back that I like is Isaiah Pacheco from the Kansas City Chiefs playing the Houston Texans, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall, and they give up the absolute most fantasy points to opposing running backs. Isaiah Pacheco has scored 12, 16, and 16 fantasy points in the last 3 games, off of 13, 14, and 22 rush attempts, on top of 3, 2, and 1 pass target. He's going to be about 17% owned, projected at 15 fantasy points here in week 15. He's 5,900 DraftKings salary, 1,700 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 49.5 points scored in this game, with the Kansas City Chiefs favored by 14. So I think this is a good game script and a good matchup. Price tag is low, upside is pretty high, ownership just about right here for his matchup and his price tag. So I like Isaiah Pacheco here versus the Houston Texans. Okay, let's take a look at the wide receiver position. Now I do like CeeDee Lamb and Jamar Chase.
But coming down in salary here, a guy that's in a fantastic matchup and I think has 20 plus fantasy point upside this week. I like Keenan Allen from the LA Chargers playing the Tennessee Titans, who have the 5th worst defense overall, and they give up the absolute most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. Keenan Allen has averaged 14.2 fantasy points per game on the season. He's getting an average of 8.2 pass targets per game. Going to be about 20% owned, projected at 16.1 fantasy points here in week 15. He's 6,800 DraftKings salary, 1,200 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 46.5 points scored in this game, with the Chargers favored by 3. Keenan Allen has scored 21, 21, and 16 fantasy points in the last 3 weeks off of 14, 14, and 7 pass targets. So he got 28 targets in the last 2 weeks. Now he's got a fantastic matchup. So I like Keenan Allen here versus the Tennessee Titans. I also like Jerry Jeudy from the Denver Broncos playing the Arizona Cardinals, who have the 2nd worst defense overall. They're middle of the pack defending opposing wide receivers. Jerry Jeudy has averaged 12.7 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 6.2 pass targets per game. He's going to be about 6% owned, projected at 13.7 fantasy points here in week 15. He's 6,100 DraftKings salary, 1,300 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 36.5 points scored in this game, with the Broncos favored by 1.5. Jerry Jeudy scored 33 and 11 fantasy points in the last 2 games off of 9 and 4 pass targets. So huge game last week. Still a lot of injuries at the wide receiver position for the Denver Broncos. So he could get a ton of pass targets this week as well. So I like Jerry Jeudy here versus the Arizona Cardinals.
Real quick, guys, I got great news. For a limited time, we're offering a full 30-day trial to Draft Dashboard. You can try all the tools for NFL. NBA is right around the corner. This is a great time to get in and try everything for 1 month. The tools are all about saving research time. You can see the last 3 games, the fantasy points per game, the targets they got per game, so you can see how involved they are in the offense, the rushes they got per game. Seeing all this stuff on one screen helps you save time and make better picks. Oh, and if you're tired of doing research every day, we just added a cheat sheet that shows hand-picked plays for the slate. No confusing stat lines, no headaches, just a simple cheat sheet that shows the absolute best players for your lineups.
Another wide receiver I like is Garrett Wilson from the New York Jets playing the Detroit Lions, who have the worst defense overall. They give up the 2nd most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. Garrett Wilson has averaged 14.1 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 7.8 pass targets per game. He's been on the field for 75% of the snaps, going to be about 15% owned, projected at 14.1 fantasy points here tonight or here in week 15. He's 6,000 DraftKings salary, 1,800 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 43.5 points scored in this game, with the Jets favored by 0.5 point. So this should be a close, competitive game. Garrett Wilson has scored 14, 27, and 26 fantasy points in the last 3 games. He got 7, 15, and 8 pass targets in those games. Great matchup. So I like Garrett Wilson here versus the Detroit Lions. Okay, let's take a look at the tight end position. I like Dalton Schultz from the Dallas Cowboys playing the Jacksonville Jaguars, who have the 9th worst defense overall. They give up the 6th most fantasy points to opposing tight ends. Dalton Schultz has averaged 9.2 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 5.6 pass targets per game. He's been on the field for 76% of the snaps, going to be about 17% owned, projected at 11.5 fantasy points here in week 15. He's 4,400 DraftKings salary, 2,100 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 47.5 points scored in this game, with the Cowboys favored by 4. Dalton Schultz has scored 15, 5, and 19 fantasy points in the last 3 games off of 10, 6, and 4 pass targets. So I like that he got 10 pass targets last week. I think he's in store for another big volume day. He's got a great matchup, so I could see him getting 6 to 8 pass targets this week. So I like Dalton Schultz here versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, if you want a tight end around the same price tag with the same upside but much lower ownership, take a look at Gerald Everett from the LA Chargers playing the Tennessee Titans, who have the 5th worst defense overall. They give up the 5th most fantasy points to opposing tight ends. Gerald Everett has averaged 9.3 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 6.1 pass targets per game. He's only going to be about 6% owned, projected at 9.5 fantasy points here in week 15. He's 4,300 DraftKings salary, 1,300 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 46.5 points scored in this game, with the Chargers favored by 3. Now, Gerald Everett has scored 8, 13, and 8 fantasy points in the last 3 games off of 8, 6, and 4 pass targets. So just about right up there in targets and production with Dalton Schultz, actually averaging more targets per game on average on the season and more average fantasy points just by a 0.1. But average stats, it looks like Gerald Everett, and he also has the better matchup. So if you do want to come down off of that high ownership of Dalton Schultz, make a tournament tight end play here, I like Gerald Everett here versus the Tennessee Titans. Now, low salary tight ends I also like, not as much as Gerald Everett or Dalton Schultz, but I also like Greg Dulcich from the Denver Broncos playing the Arizona Cardinals, who have the 2nd worst defense overall, give up the 2nd most fantasy points to opposing tight ends. He's going to be about 9% owned, only 3,600 DraftKings salary, 2,000 more on FanDuel. He scored 7, 15, and 3 fantasy points in the last 3 games off of 8, 8, and 3 pass targets. So I like that he got 16 pass targets in the last 2 weeks. So I like Greg Dulcich here versus the Arizona Cardinals. Now I think you could also go with Hunter Henry, Tyler Conklin, or Austin Hooper as sleeper pick tight ends, all low salary, low ownership guys that have gotten 5 to 8 pass targets in recent games on average. I think those guys are all in consideration.
If you want to try all these daily fantasy tools for yourself, click the link in the description below this video or just go to draftdashboard.com. You can use our DFS lineup optimizer to build quality lineups using our picks and your own custom player pool. Click the link in the description below this video and try all these daily fantasy tools right now. Thanks so much for watching. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit that bell icon so you can get instant updates whenever we post a new video.
Thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please smiggity smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Oh, and please comment below with your favorite
Player for this NFL slate.
I love to hear what you guys have to think. Thanks again, and good luck.